And now a short introduction from the producer's legal representative, Mr. Abe Oppenheimer.
Hello, and welcome to this documentary containing new and exclusive interviews with the 5 surviving members of Monty Python. The producers wish to make it clear that any views or opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speaking and hold no truth whatsoever. Pursuant therefore to Clause 4.6 of the Broadcasting Video Television Act 1989, subsection 4, 3 and 2,
Subject to Clause 4.123, no viewer or watcher may copy, repeat, impersonate, mime, either contextually or non-contextually, any material whatsoever in any public place, such as a street, pub, club, hotel, brewery, Baptist church, trumpet.
The documentary of Python. It's all about Monty Python. A no-holds-barred documentary that's entirely the truth. It's the story of Python. Here comes yet another one. Similar but not quite the same as the last one. Of the team called Python.
Here is a preview of some of the programs you'll be able to see coming shortly on BBC television.
It is such a good night to kiss. It is such a good night to dance. It is such a good night to Scooby-Doo-Doo-Doo, Scooby-Doo-Doo-Doo, Scooby-Doo-Doo-Doo love.
A meeting was set up, and we went in to see Michael Mills, who was the head of Light Entertainment. Now, I always liked Michael, but it was a very strange meeting because everyone who went to see them in those days wore suits, and we only sort of wore jeans. And Gray and I were in a sports jacket, and the other guys were being so bohemian, were in black leather jackets and all that stuff. And we sat there, and he was very nice, and he said, well, what do you want to do? And we said, well, we want to do a funny show. And he said, well,
what's the show going to be about? And we said, we don't know, really.
He said, well, now, what about film? Are you going to use a lot of film? We said, oh, film, are we going to use... yeah, we'll probably use some film.
And they said, well, is it going to have any music in it?
No.
Is he going to have guest stars? He said, oh, guest stars, I hadn't thought about that.
And they said, well, what's it going to be called? Well, we haven't got a title.
It was the worst interview that anyone or any group has ever done.
And then they all go looking at each other and they say, well,
I'll give you 13 shows, but that's all.
It's like, that was great.
It's an odd sort of double kind of confidence and no confidence.
Those were sort of the good executive-free days of the BBC.
Now, that would only have happened at that time, that he would take such a huge risk on a completely unknown group, because I was the only one who was known as a performer at that time, because I'd been in the Frost Report. All the others had just done, in quotes, kids' television.
I mean, the BBC was like the RAF in those days. So people sort of sent pipes in the bar. So, well, time to go to the bar. You know, let's not waste any time more on these programme things.
You know, the heads of the BBC, the heads of different departments couldn't wait for 5 o'clock to get down to the bar and get pissed. And they let you get on with things.
And they did very much leave it to individual producers and directors to get on with it. They didn't read our first scripts.
We were not interfered with, and that doesn't happen now. I mean, BBC, particularly now, I mean, almost all television, there's so many executives, because the pyramid has become inverted. Before, it was a few people at the top and a lot of talent. Now it's, you know, a little bit of talent and a lot of people sitting on top making important decisions about what goes and doesn't go.
Because we'd been obeying conventions that we didn't really agree with for a very long period of time, it was really like someone opening the gate to a field full of flowers, none of which had been picked. And we sort of ran into the field, and it was so easy to pick them.
At the beginning of Python, we were trying to work out what the format was. How to do it. I mean, I had done this one cartoon that Terry really liked. It was very stream of consciousness, thought that's the way of doing it. Milligan was doing with his Q series, he was breaking all the rules. I mean, there were no rules, except that there was a structure which you could never quite work out. It was only the structure of his brain, I think is what it was. And I thought, oh, this is really free what they're doing. They're commenting on themselves. They're stepping out of character. They're doing anything. And I thought, that was fantastic.
And I remember Terry Jones and I talking on the phone and saying, did you see Spike's show? And Terry said, yeah, I thought that's what we were going to do. And I said, I know. I mean, he's so far out ahead of the bunch. And that enabled us, in a sense, you know, what do they say, dwarfs standing on the shoulders of giants. That enabled us to go further than we could have done without him.
Spike Milligan was very funny on the subject, because one day he'd say, those brave boys are flying the flag. And the next day he'd say, those bastards are ripping me off.
This is a doctor sketch. What do you want?
Doctor, do you have anything for amnesia?
What? For people with bad memories, here it is again.
Here's what again?
Spike had done Q5, which had been very silly, very off the wall.
Your sketch has ended, and there is a check in the post. Another sketch will follow almost immediately.
He used to do sketches with the actor, when the actor was doing the lines, the little caption would come up underneath. John Bluthall, take-home pay, £16.43, not weekends, or what, you know. So subversive stuff was being done.
And it was Terry saying, well, let's do it like my cartoons, where we don't need punchlines, because I'd been so aware, there was particularly Pete and Dud were doing, you know, their series, and they would do these brilliant sketches, great character stuff, great lines, and then they'd have to end with a ba-bum, a punchline, and it was like, damp squib. It wasn't really very good. So let's get rid of the weak bits, just chop them out. And that's where it seemed to work so well that we'd get to a point in the sketch where I think, well, that's doesn't work beyond that. Okay, I take over at that point and try to get us to the next thing. And it just freed us up.
Okay, all clear.
Coming up with a title for a show is much more difficult than writing a show or performing a show, in the same way that coming up with an album title is far more difficult than recording the album, and groups are well known for spending months trying to come up with a decent title after they've recorded a perfectly good album. And it's the same with comedy shows.
Well, the BBC would never accept any titles we did. We would put them in, and each of the first four shows has different titles on it.
Owl Stretching Time, and A Horse, a Spoon, and a Basin, and One Whack-It, Buzzard, Stumble and Boot.
My favourite one I found the other day is, I think, one of Jones's, You Can't Call a Show Cornflakes.
We would get very silly and giggle a lot, and then in the morning telephone each other shamefaced and say, no, forget it.
They always refer to it as Barry Took's Flying Circus, I think, in their contracts. It was something to do with Barry Took. He was responsible for it. So I think Michael Palin said it should be Gwen Dibley's Flying Circus, because there's somebody in this village who was called Gwen Dibley, and he thought how wonderful for her to open the Radio Times, see she had a show.
That seemed good, and the Flying Circus had a nice ring to it. And then we just sat around throwing names around, and I can't remember which came first, Python or Monty.
I said Monty because there was a chap in our pub in Mappleborough Green who was called Monty in a little bow tie on his bar types. And we would say, has Monty been in that? No, has Monty come in, you know?
Monty was clearly sort of some shabby talent agent on Shaftesbury Avenue. And then Python was, you know, as snaky and slimy as you'd hope.
And on this particular occasion, we giggled and giggled and giggled, and then the next morning, we didn't ring around. We still liked it.
Monty Python's Flying Circus.
this was us, and would people like us or hate us? Were we getting the balance right?
I still remember as Gray and Terry Jones did that very first of all our sketches, which was about the sheep who could fly.
Good afternoon. Afternoon. Lovely day, isn't it?
And I remember Michael and I had a conversation in the dressing room just beforehand and said, and I'd said to him, do you realise, Michael, we could be the first people in history to do a 30-minute comedy show to complete silence? And he said to me, I was having the same thought.
We just didn't know how funny it was. We thought it was funny.
So we really didn't know whether it was going to work at all for anyone.
It's my belief that these sheep are labouring under the misapprehension that they're birds. Observe their behaviour. Take for a start the sheep's tendency to hop about the field on their back legs. Now witness their attempts to fly from tree to tree. Notice they do not so much fly as plummet.
And if you look at those early shows, they're actually very challenging. They do drop sheep suddenly in the middle of nowhere for no reason at all. They're actually quite situationist shows.
Some people quite close to us have obviously said very good and then rushed off. And well, that many people come back to the bar afterwards, and it had been rather quiet in the audience, and that's how I remember it.
And there were stories of coachloads of dear old souls pensioners coming and thinking it was a circus.
When we put that clip of the little old ladies, that's how our first audience was.
There were people who want to go and see a nice sort of Saturday night variety show. And I remember after the first recording thinking it hadn't worked.
It was only by about show 4 or 5 that we started getting feedback, and that was in the form of letters to the BBC from school kids.
There's a good measure in life as to what is culturally important, and that is those shows that divide the generations. And if older people start tut-tutting and young people are having a wonderful time, you probably know you've hit on something really interesting.
I first discovered Monty Python through people at my junior school who were watching it. Everyone else was just talking about this mad programme that was on.
Some people had seen Monty Python and some people hadn't. And if you hadn't seen Monty Python, you were just completely left utterly baffled about what was going on.
Good evening.
For my parents, I think they just... they didn't really get Monty Python at all. I think they saw it as quite slightly subversive, which I think in many ways it was. But I think that if you're Indians and you've gone through partition and you've left India for a better life and come to Britain, which of course, ran an empire and, was head of the Commonwealth and everyone spoke English, you didn't really want your kid to be influenced by people who dress up as women. That's not why you travelled in the first place. You travelled so that your kid has a good education and becomes a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or something like that. Not somebody who's quite patently a bloke, dressed as a woman with a high voice. So I think they kind of found it slightly disturbing that I'd be sitting there going, this is really funny. And they'd be going, this isn't funny. No, comedy is Dickens. Dickens is comedy.
I was exposed to it at a young age, and like a kind of a form of inoculation, the virus of it grew in me as a child.
I remember shouting at my family to come down, it's starting now, the programme's coming on now, it's starting, hurry up, it's starting. You'll miss it, you can't record it, Tell Dad to finish the work, come downstairs now, we have to watch it right now.
Before I had any right to be watching programmes like that, because in a way it's quite sophisticated, but I suppose as a kid you can appreciate the silliness of it and the childishness and, oh yes, and people dressing up, oh that's all right.
Hello, Mrs. Thing. Hello, Mrs. Entity. How are you then? Oh, I have had a morning. Busy. I got up at 5 o'clock. I made myself a cup of tea. I looked out of the window. Well, by then I was so worn out I had to come and have a sit down.
So then afterwards we'd talk about it and relive it and say, what was your favourite moment? Because you couldn't replay it, so... And what I would do, because there were no VCRs, my mum might be talking to a friend or say, did you see that? Or her sister say, did you see that programme last night? Did you see so-and-so last night? And you couldn't replay it. I asked them to say, they said, did you, Steve? They said to me, Steve, do what was on the show last night. So I would just be a video recorder. I'd just try and replicate what I'd seen. And I would get angry if I saw people trying to describe what was in the show and getting it wrong.
I've been here for 7 hours. You must be exhausted. Oh, have you been shopping? No, I've been shopping. It's funny. I'm worn out. I've been shopping for 6 hours. What have you bought then? Nothing. Nothing at all. A complete waste of time. Wicked, isn't it? Wicked. It'll be worse when we join the common market. That nice Mr. Heath would never allow that. It's funny he never married. He's a bachelor. Oh, that would explain it.
I think as the first series went on, we realised that there were quite a lot of people who were equivocal at the start, were really beginning to get it.
I used to play football in Hyde Park, where there was some team, and every Monday we go, first week was like, that was a weird fucking show you did last night. And the second week, that was a really strange show you did last night. I said, I like that weird show you're doing. it grew on people.
Years later, the one sketch, and possibly is one of my favourite Python sketches, that my mum suddenly burst out laughing at, was the fish slapping dance. And you kind of go, the fish slapping dance talks to people across generations and across cultural divide. You see, that's what they should do. They should be sort of maybe parachute in little MPEGs of the fish slapping dance into kind of war-torn areas, into Iraq, Afghanistan, Palestine. The whole Palestine issue could be resolved by just a bunch of people getting together and watching the fish slapping dance.
Most of the comedy I'd enjoyed was sort of, at least it sort of understood the rules of comedy, you know, that you set up a joke and there was a punchline. And this just seemed bizarre to me. I didn't really understand what was going on. It was making me laugh and I didn't understand why. It was completely baffling to me, genuinely perplexed.
What they did with their subversion of the typical grammar of the comedy that preceded them is they overrode the tedious white noise of end-of-the-pier humour. When people talk like that and a joke is delivered in that fashion, it's no longer interesting.
Sometimes they were just like, I think, they can't be bothered to finish a sketch. You know, so they'd have Graham Chapman come on and go, stop it, this is silly.
They sort of broke down that grammar, the way you receive information. So it's not lazy, it's not like they couldn't think of a punchline, it's just that it was boring.
Yes, you know, it's a man's life in England's mountains green.
Right, I heard that. I'm going to stop this sketch now, and if there's any more of this, I'm going to stop the whole programme. I thought it was supposed to be about teeth anyway. Why can't you do something about teeth? Go on.
My rustic monologue.
There hadn't been a comedy show that had wonderful animation, not to that extent. So you knew straight away you were watching something different. It wasn't going to be quite the sort of thing you'd seen before.
Terry's animation was hugely important to Python because just the animation itself was so well executed, just seemed to get the timing right, the humour was right, this kind of absurdity, the surrealism of it was all right.
What he was doing was extraordinary. He didn't know what he was doing, but his collaging of art made a whole new art form.
It also sort of, plastered over a lot of cracks in shows where sketches didn't end in the right place or.
Always something, and then he's always going into stomachs.
All right, we'll check the spleen.
So much of the show is still basic, just traditional sketch format. But by breaking it up as we did, it seemed to be new, I think. It seemed to be fresh. And it also avoided the embarrassing bits.
It can go from one sketch into another sketch, and it doesn't feel like this is even a new sketch almost. You kind of just accept, you just go along with the ride.
I think it in some ways encapsulated how the world was changing.
Up until then, spam had seemed like a perfectly normal, wholesome sort of food substance.
It's like one of those moments when you just sort of write something and
you know, is this funny? And I can remember reading out to Mike, and Mike saying, well, it's all right, it's quite funny. And then I think we put in bits about the Vikings and things like that. I think I wanted to put those in. We read it out. I think Mike read it out in the group session, and John and Graham said that they'd take it away and rework it, and so John and Graham rewrote it, and Mike and I felt that they'd missed the point. I don't know what it was. They'd missed the rhythms, because the whole thing is a rhythm joke. Really, it's just rhythms, and so we. Absolutely, without saying anything to them, we just substituted our original sketch in the final shooting script, and that's what we did.
I don't like spam! Don't make a fuss, dear. I'll have your spam. I love it.
With the Pythons, there is a lot of satirical stuff, but there is a thing about a curse on all your houses.
It doesn't shut anyone out. It's very inclusive. If you get it, it doesn't really matter where you've come from. It doesn't matter what kind of day you've had. It doesn't matter about your ethnic background or your age or anything like that.
They would take the piss out of a working class guy, the Gumby.
I would put a tax on all people who stand in water. Whoa!
And an upper class guy.
I would tax the nude in my bed. No, not tax. What is the word?
And women in the hairdressers and God knows what. So everybody was fair game.
And that's the great thing about absurd and surreal comedy, is that even though a lot of Python stuff is based on wordplay, a lot of it is based on kind of literary references and stuff like that, it's still absurd. I suddenly felt that I kind of understood this world, but also then it became a sort of currency within which you connected with other people, because other people got it as well. That became your community. It didn't become... you didn't define your community by your ethnicity or by where you lived. Suddenly there was a comedy ethnicity, which was much more interesting, and it also made you feel a bit superior as well, because you got all the references. You knew who Proust was, for instance, and then you got beaten up by the kids who didn't know who Proust was.
Proust in his first book wrote about
Proust in his first book, he wrote about Proust in his first...
Yeah, I mean, it's a typical Python thing. It pretends to be intellectual and isn't. Nobody's fucking read Proust, but the idea is if you summarise Proust competition, it sounds very intellectual. In fact, it isn't, because nobody's read the fucking stuff.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't think any of our contestants this evening have succeeded in encapsulating the intricacies of Proust's masterwork. So I'm going to award the first prize this evening to the girl with the biggest tits.
But what I loved about Monty Python is they would not compromise. So, and I would hear sketches and laugh at things, and it's only as a child. And I wouldn't understand these references often.
There's stuff that I know that I only know because I would have seen it in... I wouldn't have probably known that Beethoven was deaf but for a Morrissey album and a Monty Python sketch.
I know who Reginald Maudling was, a forgotten politician.
A lot of my education, and I think this is important if you've been state educated, is received by proxy from programmes like Python and Blackadder. That's where I sort of learned what those kind of things mean.
La Fontaine. I mean, I didn't know. I had no idea what that meant. These was funny words that Monty Python used, so it kind of worked in a rhythmic way.
There's nothing supercilious or haughty about it. Like, oh God, we know who Wittgenstein is. It's like there's just like, there's Wittgenstein's mum, and look at his tits. It was never like overtly like you don't notice that you're learning stuff. And that's how education should work.
In retrospect, had I said to my parents at any point while they were saying, turn this rubbish off, this is awful rubbish, what are you watching these people? Look, it's a man. It's a man. It's patently a man. He's dressed in a woman. If I'd said, he went to Oxford, they'd be going, he was really? It's very good. You should be like him, you know. Why don't you wear a dress?
As you get older, you start to see traces of like the fact that they are highly educated men with brilliant vocabularies and dangerous, subversive ideas.
All the Pythons are essentially middle class. They are the sons of professional people. And what their revolt is, really, is against their parents and their generation.
I don't think anybody really took Flying Circus to be as filthy and as subversive as it is, because it's so silly. You don't really view it as being politically incendiary or anything like that, but it is. It's all those things.
I never thought of the Pythons as being politically on the nose, as it were. I think their genius was that they were wonderfully subversive. And the subversive in the sense that they would allow their imaginations and impulses to take them places where we hadn't been before.
Don't say the kid's name, Vic!
Francesco, Luigi.
We was too late. The Reverend Duke saw the light.
They're anti-establishment because, of course, the architects they're always sending up, the program planners they're always sending up, the accountants they've always got it in for. All those people represented the kind of deferential society into which they've been introduced by their parents.
And of course that is finally political.
They've defined and nailed the foibles and the characters in English society. Well, it's a sociological triumph, really.
Miss Rita Fairbanks, you organised this reconstruction of the Battle of Pearl Harbor. Why?
Well, we've always been extremely interested in modern drama. We were, of course, the first Townswomen's Guild to perform Camp on Blood Island. And last year, of course, we did our extremely popular reenactment of Nazi war atrocities. And so this year we thought we'd like to do something in a lighter vein.
I think the Pythons were probably a little unsophisticated so far as the fair sex was concerned. And I don't think that we would have felt very comfortable writing anything that approached a genuine love scene. I think we would go, oh, you know, we're English after all. You know, this isn't emotion, this is sentiment, and therefore to be despised. So what we wrote was caricatured stuff. And most of the time, it was the sort of stuff you saw when you went to a pantomime.
Well, I can see you're all ready to go, so I'll just wish you good luck in your latest venture.
Thank you very much, young man.
Ladies and gentlemen, the world of history is proud to present the premiere of the Batley Townswomen's Guild reenactment of the Battle of Pearl Harbor.
And it was, in fact, the producer-director at the time who took me on to be in only 5. That's all I was meant to be, in 5 episodes. And by the time I got to the 2nd or 3rd episode, the guys decided they liked me a lot. They thought I fitted in beautifully. And they put their foot down. I wasn't going to be in any more episodes. I wasn't, but they put their big Python foot down, as it was, said, no, we want Carol. We're not having anybody else. So thanks, guys.
I can never work it out how she does it, but because everybody can be so bizarre and strange, and she would just float right through it with a integrity is a funny word for Carol, but there it is. There's something that's so solid, and there were other girls in the show at different points, but they never got it right. They never seemed to get the way of performing right, and she got it.
To put England's social legislation in a European context is Professor Gert van der Woops of the Rijksmuseum in The Hague.
She always saw the irony of it. There was always a little extra twist. She knew what she was sending up and how she was sending it up. So she would play the dumb blonde, but she was no dumb blonde.
I think that part of the reason I watched Python, this is terrible as a comedy fan, but I watched it for Carol Cleveland. possibly getting her tits out.
You had a good shot at seeing a pair of tits, even if they were cartoon tits.
Yeah, they had that woman, didn't they? Carol Cleveland, is it? Like, yeah, I sort of remember, like, she was sort of sexy. But no, I was in it for the songs and the voices. Like, you know, because my interest in it predated my interest in breasts, and that must be hard for you to imagine.
You find, if you ask all these kids, the reason they were watching is because they had bare breasts on that show. Sometimes real, even.
A good 40% of why I watched it was because it was naughty and there might be boobs, which is terrible, really.
What's my favourite sketch?
That's like the hardest question you could ever ask a Python fan, isn't it?
Favourite Monty Python sketch? There's... Man.
Monty Python.
I have to think. God, that's tricky.
If I had a favourite sketch...
I'm trying to remember what that would be.
There's many. I'd have a top 10.
If you had to say, well, pick one and put it in the time capsule, it would have to be the parrot, you know.
I wish to register a complaint. You know, I mean, we've all met them, haven't we?
Married Connie, beginning of '68. We did a show called How to Irritate People, and we wrote a sketch about a second-hand car salesman that was quite cliched, but it was based on a guy called Mr. Gibbons, I think, who Michael Palin used to buy cars from, and Michael would say to him, ring him up and say, the gearbox is sticky, and Mr. Gibbons would say, oh, well, a quality car, you always get a sticky gearbox. It's a sign of a quality car. He was a completely slippery person. We wrote a second-hand car sketch, and then years later looked at it, and I said, there's something about this I like, and we decided that the thing was to change it to an animal, and we had a bit of a discussion about whether it was a dog or a parrot, and in the end, I guess we just thought the parrot was funnier.
Look, my lad, I've had just about enough of this. That parrot is definitely deceased. And when I bought it not half an hour ago, you assured me that its lack of movement was due to it being tired and shagged out after a long squat.
And Gray and I used to write out the thesaurus all the time because we couldn't think of something, so I just flip through the thesaurus and shout out words. Plummet, you know, cardigan. And sometimes we would go, ah! And we'd be off most of the time, of course. And so I just looked up dead, and there was this extraordinary, wonderful list of synonyms for dead, and we just started to write it.
This parrot is no more. It has ceased to be. It's expired and gone to meet its maker. This is a late parrot.
One of the sketches where I remember being really amused and just thinking, wow, this was really cheeky, is the one where there appears to be a TV game show centred around blackmail.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to Blackmail. And to start tonight's programme, we go north to Preston in Lancashire and Mrs. Betty Teal. Hello, Mrs. Teal. Now, this is for £15 and is to stop us revealing the name of your lover in Bolton.
They show some footage of two people having an affair shot on a grainy camera through a window, and say, you know, if you don't call soon and donate money, then we'll show the rest of it.
Hello, sir. Hello, yes. No, sir, no, I'm sure you didn't. No, it's all right, sir. We don't morally censor you. We just want the money.
I just remember that being really amazing to me because I'd never seen anyone sort of explode the conventions of TV before. I thought that was... I mean, even though I came to it late, I'd never really seen someone mocking television before. And that just seemed really outrageous to me, really naughty, you know, and kind of saucy and sort of quite adult. I remember that seeming quite sort of exciting in a way.
Not at all, sir. Thank you.
The eruption of the Inquisition into the room and the torture by a comfy armchair and everything, that still makes me laugh. I love that.
I like the one where he goes in... He goes into a shop and it's all about being a spy. Wasn't there one where it's all supposed to be passwords and the guy has no idea what he's talking about, and it's all code words, and there's people with sort of, there's probably Cleese in a sort of trench coat, and everyone's looking like a spy and he's not. Something like that.
Just how much do you know?
What about?
out!
Are you from the British Dental Association?
No, I'm a tobacconist.
Get away from that door!
I'll just go over the other...
Stay where you are. You'd never leave this bookshop alive.
Why not?
You know too much, my dental friend.
Oh, I don't know anything.
Come clean. You're a dentist, aren't you?
No, I'm a tobacconist.
A tobacconist who just happens to be buying a book on teeth.
My favourite sketch is a strange one. It's the one where Graham and John are watching television and there's a penguin on top of the TV.
Funny that penguin being there, isn't it? What's it doing there? Standing! I can see that!
It's brilliant because for the level of hilarity that they were getting across, they were very good at not laughing.
Penguins don't come from next door, they come from the Antarctic!
But in that one sketch, I think Graham Chapman shouts, "Burma!" and then has to turn away.
Why'd you say Burma? I panicked.
And I just remember watching it as a 15-year-old kid and just loving the fact that they found it funny and they were enjoying it, and seeing them having such enormous fun just dressing up as old women and being utterly batty.
Lions don't halt! No, but penguins do. They'll run rings round you logically. Oh, Intercourse the penguin.
It's just gone 8 o'clock and time for the penguin on top of your television set to explode.
I really like that one where Graham Chapman goes into a shop and he goes, oh, hello, Mr. Luxury Yacht. And he says, no, it's spelt luxury yacht, but it's pronounced throat wobbler mangrove.
Good evening. I have with me in the studio tonight one of the country's leading skin specialists, Raymond Luxury Yacht.
That's not my name.
I'm sorry, Raymond Luxury Yacht.
No, it's spelt Raymond Luxury Yacht, but it's pronounced throat wobbler mangrove.
I remember the joy of, fucking hell, that sounds amazing. Throat wobbler mangrove, what does that mean? What could that ever mean? And it's spelt luxury yacht. Yeah, I like that.
You're a very silly man, and I'm not going to interview you.
Anti-Semitism.
Not at all. It's not even a proper nose. It's polystyrene.
Give me my nose back.
You can collect it at reception, now go away.
I want to be on television.
Well, you can't.
There is such a thing as a classical sketch, and it had me rolling in the aisles. And it still does.
I remember that bit in the Piranha Brothers where he goes, they called a week later, said I bought one of their fruit machines and would I pay for it?
How much did they want?
£750,000.
Why didn't you call for the police?
I noticed that the bloke with the thermonuclear device was the chief constable for the area.
Anyway, a week later, they come back, said the cheque had bounced, and that I had to see Doug.
Doug? He pours a glass of water. I was terrified.
Everyone was terrified of Doug.
I've seen grown men pull their own heads off rather than see Doug.
Even Dinsdale was frightened of Doug. What did he do?
He used sarcasm. He knew all the tricks.
Dramatic irony.
Metaphor, pathos.
Puns, parody, litotes.
Hyperbole.
And satire.
He was vicious. That sort of sums up what they do.
The Lumberjack song is a wonderful thing when it's great, some of the live performances.
How would you like it, sir?
Oh, just short back and sides, please.
How do you do that?
Oh, just ordinary short back and sides.
It's not a razor cut. Razor cut! The spurred artery murder!
The Lumberjack song was totally came out of a sketch that we were writing about a barber shop. and we just couldn't think of how to end it. It said, well, after, we were just absolutely stuck. It was the end of the day and we really wanted to go. We really wanted to go and have a beer. And I said, why don't we just end with a song? That's how they used to end music hall routines. If they couldn't get an ending, they'd end with a song. I think we then rang up a group that organised the music on the Python shows and hummed the tune to him, and he set it to music. And then we went and had the beer.
I cut down trees, I skip and jump. I like to press wildflowers. I put on women's clothing and hang around in bars.
Cuts down trees, he skips and jumps. He likes to press wildflowers. He puts on women's clothing
I like how the chorus gradually become disgruntled and reject it. They're going along with it. I like that. That's what I like. Is whoa, no! We've been cajoled into agreeing with a lifestyle that we would condemn. This isn't what being a lumberjack's about.
I cut down trees, wears high heels, suspenders and a bra. Oh, shabby, just like my dear mama.
Dear sir, I wish to complain in the strongest possible terms about the song which you have just broadcast about the lumberjack who wears women's clothes. Many of my best friends are lumberjacks, and only a few of them are transvestites. Yours faithfully, Brigadier Sir Charles Arthur Strong, Mrs. P.S. I have never kissed the editor of the Radio Times.
If you're an anarchic but intelligent bunch of people, you're going to run into trouble with the authorities, particularly since sending up the authorities is one of the roots of your humour. And of course, one of the authorities that they ran into difficulties with immediately was the BBC, the very people who were putting them on.
We were quite grumpy, I suppose, with the BBC. We appreciated being able to do the show, but everything else had been closed in fairly tightly. And I remember Terry Gilliam, they paid him so little, he couldn't afford an assistant, so he had to do absolutely everything himself to start with. And this was one of the early sort of points of contention, because he was doing great stuff, but no one was kind of acknowledging it.
Panorama will be returning, introduced as usual by Tony Jacklin, and Lulu will be tackling the Old Man of Hoy. And for those of you who prefer drama, there's sport.
Early battles were to do with scheduling. When the show went out late anyway, I mean, there was very much a feeling in the BBC that young people should not see this show. We didn't mind that so much, we sort of accepted that, but then suddenly it would be taken off for 3 weeks.
You don't mind bumped on for something important or an outbreak of World War III or something like that, but Croft's dog show, give me a break.
They would change the time, they'd pull us off, they'd do all of those things.
You can be mucked about by schedules, but I think you've got to get used to that. You've got to produce a programme that people want on.
Python was establishing itself as a sort of cult show, and only later did we kind of realise how many people at university were sort of cramming in whatever, time it was on. They would sit and watch this show. You had to watch it. And the fact that some weeks it wasn't there and other weeks it was a different time, that was sort of testing your loyalty to the programme. So I think we built up a lot of people who were jolly well going to see Python, whatever the BBC did with it.